this down here just as captures. It's like just back up.
Okay.
Okay. So, so where'd you grow up?
In Fort Worth, Texas, in the plains of Texas.
Okay. And when you were a child, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I had no idea what I wanted to be, and I think there's a way in which it's good not to know. There was a time when my heart was set on raising horses. I grew up riding horses, and I also, believe it or not, went for about 2 or 3 years where I kind of wanted to be Annie Oakley, and barrel race horses. But there weren't any, sort of grand intellectual models in my childhood, which was fine. I think in a way I had no expectations about, college and things like that, which probably liberated me from any specific expectations of what I was going to do.
And when did you move out of Texas?
When I went off to college, and I was the first person in my family to go to the university. So, and I went to Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, which is as far away as my parents would let me go. There was no possibility of going, up east. And my father was, in fact, horrified that there was no football team at Emory. So that tells you something about the culture I came from. Is
he a big Cowboys Longhorn?
He was for years. Yeah, he absolutely was.
And how did you first get interested in what you're doing now in philosophy?
Yeah. Well, what I do now, I'm a historian of philosophy, and I really came to philosophy through a sort of very roundabout means. I was always interested in kind of visual things, and so when I got to college, I was just struck by the history of art, and I really liked this idea of sort of studying, especially the combination of painting or mosaics and architecture. So I was really grabbed by art history and went to Florence, in fact, for a few months. And it was actually studying in Florence that completely changed my life. I had gotten to the university I really didn't know very much about the world at all. And so, I guess I kind of felt behind for a while. There were people who had read great books and so on, and I was always really impressed by that, but hadn't done so myself. And so when I got to Florence, there was something about it was just such a perfect site of, as it turns out, philosophical, art historical, and just cultural combinations of things. And so I realized at that point that if I read a lot and looked a lot, that I could really get a hold on some basic ideas that were both exciting, and I realized I could find my way through. And what I didn't know at the time is that was really history of philosophy. So I studied art history. I started reading around in philosophy. I took a little philosophy at the end of my undergraduate time, and then went back to Italy for a while, and again did a little philosophy, and then just suddenly got interested. So I was lucky enough to get into a good graduate program. I honestly, to this day, think that they made a mistake somehow. I had no idea how they wound up accepting me, given that I hadn't done that much philosophy, and wanted to be an art historian slash historian of philosophy, and the philosophy finally won out in the end.
Did you go straight from college to graduate school?
No, I didn't. I spent a lot. I actually, in fact, a professor in graduate school called me, believe it or not, an academic gypsy, because I had been in Europe a couple of years. I taught in Rome for a year, just living. In fact, I was a millionaire. I made 4 million lira a month. This is way back, before the euro. And so I kind of lived from hand to mouth for a year in Rome and studied Latin. I went to the Gregorian University and took advanced Latin classes. In fact, one of my favorite moments in those days was that I was the only non-nun, non-priest in an upper-level Latin class taught by a man who's now become famous, Reginald Foster, who taught these advanced Latin classes, and we would trek around Rome and read Latin together. So that was just a fabulous year, and that's more than anything else what convinced me to go into to do serious study of the history of philosophy. Really.
Oh, neat.
Yeah,
sounds like a lot of fun.
It's
what everybody kind of dreams of living hand to
yeah,
mouth in Rome for a
unfortunately,
year.
I don't have the time to do that now. That's what I would really like to do again. So when I got to graduate school, I was a little bit, well, really very unusual. I went to a good program, and a lot of people had done logic and kind of advanced, what people called at the time analytic philosophy, and I had done this kind of touchy-feely, art history, interested in history of philosophy, and it worked out, obviously. But at the time, I just thought this was one more big experiment, and we would see how it worked.
And how did you come to Columbia? How did you end up here?
I moved to Columbia. I actually had a job in the California system, and I took a slight cut in salary to come to Columbia, I have to say, which some friends of mine thought was insane. But I really love New York. I liked the idea of being closer to Europe because I do research in Europe in the summers. And also, I really liked the idea of teaching the core curriculum. Given my background, this kind of interdisciplinary tendency I have, I thought was really nicely met by having had a lot to do with the core curriculum. So in fact, when I first got the job here, people were surprised in the philosophy department, were surprised that I wanted to teach Lit Hum as opposed to CC. CC is more philosophical, but that, again, suited me. And I haven't been sorry, really. And there's been issues about living in New York sometimes with children and so on, but I've mostly been really happy.
And it sounds like you mentioned, it sounds like your background kind of relates to the core curriculum in that you try to capture a little bit of everything, moving up from, I guess, the general areas to something way more specialized.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing that happened to me when I got tenure, I remember having this kind of revelatory experience. I thought, I am so boring. For about the past 6 years, all I've done is my own research. I've only done my 16th and 17th century philosophers. These early books in Latin, and with all of these heavy-duty philosophical ideas. And so when I got tenure, I thought, what I can do? I can actually spend time now remembering why I liked art history and all these things. So I started teaching art humanities, and really became more interested in trying to integrate some of the parts of the core. So, in fact, I'm teaching Lit Hum starting, next week, the first semester of Lit Hum, and I'm already thinking about it differently than I did the first time I taught Lit Hum years ago, because of this relation I now have again with art history. So I'm really excited about again bringing these things together.
This is great. So how many years have you taught in the core?
Well, I've been at Columbia. It's really scary. I've been at Columbia now, 15, 16 years. And I bet, except when I've been on leave, and I think 1 year when I was busy with committee work, I think I've taught a semester of the core every single semester. So it's mostly been Lit Hum and Art Hum. I give lectures to CC sometimes because my area overlaps with what CC does, Descartes and the scientific revolution and that kind of stuff. So I've been pretty involved in the core. And as I think one of the things that I've been moving into in my research, I have this book series that I'm going to be the general editor of this book series, Oxford Philosophical Concepts. And that's, each book is going to be a collection on a concept in history of philosophy, mostly European philosophy and its transformations. But one of the things that's happened, really solely because of my work in the core, is those books are going to be very interdisciplinary. They're going to be what we're going to call side notes, which are written by non-philosophers on topics from art history, from literature, that impact philosophical ideas in ways that we hope that both philosophers and non-philosophers will find interesting. And that really is motivated by the success of the kind of interdisciplinary work that we do when we teach in the core.
That's so neat. I remember when that came out. It just seems like it seems almost obvious, and obviously no one's really thought of combining philosophy that way, or approaching philosophy that way. Which kind of, you might have stolen my next question, but I was wondering, my next question was, what are you working on now? Is this series taking up a majority of your time outside of teaching?
Yeah, so I have like 3 book projects, which is kind of ridiculous, and it's ridiculous because I kind of moved from one to the other, and so one's almost done, and the other 2 almost done. And the reason they haven't quite gotten done is because of the book series. So the book series really is taking up a huge amount of time. The reason, I mean, it's fun time. I get to correspond with great scholars, international scholars, about how to think about the medieval section of the volume on evil, or on space or eternity. I mean, these are really kind of fun things to have to do. And so that would take some time anyway, but what really is taking time is that, I mean, the good news is that the editors have been quite taken, so these are serious scholars of the history of philosophy, and they've been completely taken by this idea of including these interdisciplinary editions. But the question is how to do it, and one thing we've decided is that they can't be just fun. If you're doing a volume on the virtues, it might be really fun to have just representations of the virtues in the history of art or something, and that will probably be included, by the way. But you want to find examples from theater or literature, or maybe in some cases, if it's relevant, Hindu views of some of these issues that are actually philosophically interesting and approach the topic from a different perspective. So insofar as it's different, people are having to think hard and expand their imaginations, really, to do that and do it well. And so we're all kind of working together to do that. And that's taking time. I have to respond, and I have to put them in contact with people who might be able to help them. So while that's really fun, it really is time consuming.
It does sound fascinating.
Yeah.
On to some nice, fun questions. Do you have children?
I do. I have 2 boys, 18 and one soon to be 15.
Oh, it's an exciting age.
Yeah,
Is the 18-year-old in high school, or did he just graduate?
No, the 18-year-old actually graduated a year early.
Oh, wow.
So he's just started his 2nd year at Bennington.
Oh, nice.
Which is really fabulous.
Oh,
yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, Vermont's wonderful, and he grew up in the shadow of Columbia.
Yeah.
So he definitely wanted to get away, and this has worked out really well. And I've been committed to public schools, and they've both been in public schools in the city. And I have to say, at this point, they're practically grown, so I just have to attend to some food every now and then, things like that.
And do you have any pets?
No pets.
Okay.
No, we had a pet worm once. Right.
What's something? This question always stumps her. When I send out the email, I should warn people. But what's something that your students would never guess about you? Be it a hidden talent or a secret hobby.
Yeah. Well, basically, I don't think I have any talents whatsoever. No, they probably. I don't know. I think they might be surprised at what the books I work on, these 17th century texts, look like. Because I try to make, even the history of philosophy, I try to make it kind of lively and not relevant in the sense that, it's about their day-to-day life, but I want it to speak to them. And I think, honestly, if they saw these dense Latin text, they would be a little bit taken aback. Yeah.
Since this will be running in January, I believe. So, what do you know? What you'll be teaching next semester? Will you be teaching?
Yeah, I'll be teaching philosophy and feminism.
Okay.
And I may teach another core course in the spring. I'm hoping to be able to do a whole year of the core this year. I'm quite interested in getting more involved in the core and kind of thinking about being a bit more involved. So I want to think about this year. A lot of my attention this year will be taken up by the core, I think. But my philosophy and feminism class is my favorite class at this point. I love it. It's I'm become very interested in feminist issues. I have been for a long time, but recently I've realized that teaching feminist issues is really a way of engaging students, and it's both philosophically rich, and I really think that it's politically important. Some of our best philosophy majors have come to philosophy through this course. In fact, they didn't know they were interested in philosophy when they wound up taking it and realizing that they're interested in philosophy.
What a cool opportunity for you.
Yeah, and it's just a fabulous, great class. I mean, students. I have fun, and students seem to. Students come back 2 or 3 or 4 years later and say how really important it was for them in terms of their development and thinking about these kinds of issues. And believe it or not, in philosophy, we still are pretty far behind in terms of numbers of women in the profession and successful. In fact, just this summer, 20 women of philosophy got together and formed a task force. So all of this sort of gender feminist side of my life is suddenly becoming more prominent.
And this semester you're teaching just Lit Hum?
I'm teaching Lit Hum in a graduate course.
Okay.
The graduate course on funky causation.
What's that mean?
It's like, well, in fact, two or three of us have for a long time been worrying about causal notions in the history of philosophy that are really important to the development of philosophy, but have not been taken quite as seriously as they should have because they're weird. Causal emanation, where something supremely good or something that has an ultimate being somehow manages to be in all the things it creates, but not being part of them. Now that's a really interesting philosophical puzzle. How can that work? And some of the great minds in the history of philosophy have thought some version of that. There's also this idea of sympathetic universal harmony, where insofar as we're all part of the same rational system, we're all in some kind of sympathetic relation to one another. And this notion solved a lot of problems that in physics and in ethics and so on in the history of philosophy. But a lot of these weird notions have been pushed aside and not taken as seriously or not studied as much because they're not like anything. What we believe now seems to be quite alien to this way of thinking. So what developed out of the work that some of us were doing is, in fact, the guy Eric Schleiser, who's a friend of mine, just started calling these notions funky causation. So I'm going to teach a course on these funky causal notions.
Sounds like fun.
It's a good title.
Yeah.
Anyway.
How do you recharge?
I actually go bike riding or running. I go jogging in the park. My sons have been really involved in politics, especially when we were very involved in the Obama campaign and the primaries, and went to Texas, for example. So one of the things we do is just sit around and talk about what's happening politically, and I love it because usually they know a lot more than I do, and that somehow is nice for me. But also, you don't want to talk about what kind of community work you do because it sounds like you're suggesting that you're a good soul. But in fact, it really does cool my jets and calms me down in a good way to be involved in some of the organizations I'm involved with in the city. I like to get outside of Columbia and my own little pathetic little world and do something else sometimes.
I wouldn't call it pathetic, but I love running in the park. It's my favorite thing in the whole wide world.
In Central Park is so beautiful.
It's such a blessing to live right next door as well, just to walk out your door and be there.
Yeah, get in the zone.
Yeah,
definitely.
If you could be anywhere in the world right now, where would you be?
That's a really good question. I'd love to be in Rome again for a while. I'd love to be with my son right now in this first week of college, just kind of, talking to him about what he's doing, though he would probably not want me there. I would. I love leaving a classroom when I think I've done a half decent job, revealing the profundity and pleasure of the ideas. That's always, that's one of my favorite moments. So maybe just being in that moment right now, it would be a great pleasure.
What on your resume are you most proud of?
My resume.
What professional accomplishment?
Right. I really liked. I was very moved to get the Great Teacher Award last year, and I think I'm a hard teacher. I'm a hard grader. I'm tough, and I think the fact that students have responded, and I think it really to this philosophy of feminism class. I think they like being pushed in these ways. I think I'm proudest of that, I guess. I'm also very proud of my children. So.
What's your favorite food?
Oh, my favorite food.
We're getting to the hard-hitting questions.
The densest possible chocolate cake.
What are you reading, or what's the last really good book you read not related to work?
Right. Well, it turns out this is related to work, but I just read Toni Morrison's new book, A Mercy, which is just fabulously moving, and I've decided that, I didn't read it with this in mind, but I decided that when I teach the second half of Lit Hum again, I may wind up ending with that book. It's short, which is good, coming at the end of Lit Hum, but also, it's Toni Morrison's normal attempt to be profound and write beautiful English prose, and it all somehow works, in my opinion. Yeah.
I thought it was amazing, and that book, I've struggled with a couple of her books and a few. I actually fortunately went to a high school that we read several of her books in high school. It was a very diverse school, and they pushed that diverse curriculum, but Mercy was wonderful. And on that note, you're teaching that as part of the MiniCourse.
Right.
Can you just talk a little bit about the MiniCourse?
Right, yeah. Well, I have a lot to say about the core, in the sense that, I think it's really good for 18 and 19-year-olds, but I also think it's even better for 30 and 40-year-olds. And so one of the great things about the core is that it gives anyone who's been at Columbia, 10 years later, 20 years later, 30 years later, it gives them something to talk about. It gives them a common set of, in a way, values and concerns, at least intellectual values. And so I completely approve. I mean, Deborah Martinson has been doing a really good job, I think, pushing the core in ways that will encourage alumni to come back and read the books and study and think the thoughts again. But what I've been completely struck by in the mini core courses is that I've been struck by the fact that these people, when they revisit the core, are even more moved by it than they were originally. And they say that. They say, I had no idea that Montaigne was so wonderful or so profound in this way. I just found him annoying, when I was 18. But also, my version of the mini course is kind of an attempt to do this interdisciplinary work. So the one I taught last year it's apparently worked somewhat well. We did, I talked a little bit about philosophy and kind of set the philosophical context for then something that they had read from Lit Hum, one of the literature humanities text, and then we looked at some images from Art Hum, and that sort of helped visualize and helped us again see the connection between the philosophical context and the literary or artistic one. And the students, at least the people who signed up for this class, seemed to think it all worked. And so I'm going to try that again this year. And I'm going to do A Mercy by Toni Morrison, and I've decided to do art by Carol Walker, who's this really, really out there, very interesting African-American artist who does silhouettes. In fact, there was a show of her work at the Whitney about a year and a half ago, which was really interesting and hooks up well, especially with A Mercy. It's very historical. It's about 19th century images and sexuality and often the abuse of female slaves, and it's all of this stuff that's really heavy and difficult, but also somehow oddly and strangely beautiful, which is exactly what I think Toni Morrison's books are often like. So those are two. Those are going to merge in one of the mini courses, one of the mini course classes.
And one final question: what's your favorite spot in New York City?
The reservoir, I think, at this point. Though I really like this. I hope this doesn't sound too pretentious. I love to go to the Metropolitan Museum and just wander around some of those back rooms where the tourists usually don't get. So like the Pacific Island wing, or I just discovered some of the Japanese art the other day. Some of the details of that I hadn't really paid attention to. So I like to sort of just going someplace I haven't been. There's something enormously, I don't know, there's something really calming and inspiring about doing that kind of thing. So what I should do, I guess, is run around the reservoir and then go to the Metropolitan to combine the two. But I guess maybe that wouldn't work so well.
Have you been out in Central Park lately in the evening and seen the raccoons?
Yes, I have.
I actually saw a bunch. I saw 3 of them crossing Central Park West one night, going into the bushes right at the castle at 105.
Oh wow,
yeah.
That would be so well. Listen, I gotta tell you what happened to me though. I was running in the park, and these tourists were sitting around going, "Oh, look, look, look," you know. And I just thought that they were, you know, all, you know, 'cause a lot of birds, and they were gawking at a bird or something. And it turns out there were raccoons fornicating in the tree. So, I guess that you know, you shouldn't have this on the tape. But anyway, it was like one of those New York moments, you know, like you'd think that we were out in the middle of the woods someplace.
That's
you know.
pretty funny.
Yeah.
Neat. Well, thank you so much.
Okay, well that was fast.
Yeah, that
Great.
was. It was. I told you it'd be pretty
Yeah,
painless.
yeah, good.
It's nice. I've been. My wife works at Lamont